Right now? Yeah? Hey, we can talk?
Yeah. Which is what we should do. That's what I would do.
Oh,
That's what we would do.
so I could have been like, I could watch myself on this. I could.
You
Yeah.
could.
You go back on
You can
YouTube
pull
and
your
look
phone
up
out,
our.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on now?
Yeah, or if you put your phone on mute and you want to bring up either YouTube or Facebook, I would say Facebook gets the most activity live.
Right.
You can watch the comments come in live.
All right, well, this is Uneducated. It is Friday, June 5th. And remember, the whole idea behind this show is that you don't have to be educated to think about issues of the day and about the Bible. You just have to be serious about wanting to know the truth. And if you're serious and intentional about wanting to know the truth, you don't have to have a ton of education to do that. So we're going to get into a couple different things today. But before we do that, just real quick, I want to remind you that this coming Sunday is our first Sunday for reopening. So we want you to come and be a part of our services. But if for some reason you don't feel comfortable yet, we want you to continue to stay home and find us on Facebook or YouTube and worship and celebrate with us online. So we're going to continue to do all that kind of stuff as well as be here in person. So we have taken the precautions that we feel are necessary, and so I think you can feel comfortable if you do come. But again, if you don't feel comfortable, that's totally fine. You can watch us online until you get to that place. So with that too, then don't forget that Wednesdays is our prayer meeting, and we will be starting back here in person prayer meetings now.
Did you start Facebook? Okay.
Prayer meetings are now going to be in person, but we will Zoom them as well for people that just don't feel comfortable coming back. We're going to continue to Zoom our prayer meetings as well, so you can be a part of that. Okay? With us today, we have a special guest. This is Pastor David Gray. He's the pastor at First Baptist Church in Garrettsville, and so we're glad that he's with us today. And we're going to talk evangelism. We're going to talk discipleship. And then we're going to take a little bit of time towards the end of our segment to talk about some of the things that have been going on, current events, and just get some perspectives from all of us. And that's just it. It's perspectives. But at the same time, we're going to seek truth here. We're going to seek to try and find what is the best understanding and the wisest understanding of even everything that's going on today. So, David, thank you for being here with us, and that's one of the things that you always need to be careful to do. But thank you for being with us, David. Appreciate you being here.
It's really good to be here. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad that you're here with us. I asked David to take a look at some of the things that we have been talking about for the last month now in the Gospel of Luke. And so we finished up Luke chapter 14, verses 25 through 35, and our series was entitled Expensive Christianity. And I believe that Christianity is an expensive endeavor. It's going to cost you everything if you're going to choose to follow Christ. And so, David, I just wanted to get your perspective on this. We've been kind of asking the question, can you be a disciple of Christ and not learn from him? Can you be a disciple of Christ and not pursue his wisdom, his understanding in your life? Is it possible that someone can be saved and going to an eternity with God and never be his disciple? What are your thoughts on that?
Being a disciple in and of itself seems that you would be saying that you are a follower, that you are a learner, that you are attempting to receive. There's a difference between being saved and maybe having some sense that you're going to heaven, and I'm not sure that you can do this, but there's a difference between being saved and being a disciple. A disciple has to be a follower. That by definition, that person is seeking to follow after the teacher. Mm-hmm. And so I cannot see a person calling themselves a disciple and having no desire to learn. Okay,
all right. But you are, because I've read some commentators, and I push back a little bit. Not that I've totally come to a conclusion, because it's it's kind of a mystery, the whole thing. Salvation, in some sense, is a mystery, that God loved us so much that he gave his only Son, that whoever would believe in him would not perish but have everlasting life. That seems pretty simple. Doesn't say anything there about necessarily being a disciple, but that idea of believing, to me, seems like there's more there than just an intellectual assent so that I can go to heaven when I die, right?
You would think. Now, the question is we've got to be careful, I think, because this whole thing is grace. It's by grace we're saved through faith. That not of ourselves. It's a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. For we are his workmanship, created unto good works. Now the challenge when you are looking at that is that it's not only grace enough to be saved, but it's the grace to continue each and every day. Not only is the quote-unquote salvation process, the justification process, due to this sense of being saved, but our sanctification, our day-to-day continuance, takes the very Spirit of the living God. Anything that we're doing in our own strength is just works. Now, that being said, the reality is that you need to question whether you're saved if you have no desire to do what he has told us to do.
Okay.
If you love me, you will obey my commands. And so if we don't want to learn from him, if we don't want to follow after him, if we don't want more of him, if we don't love him and then consequently love our neighbors, then the question is do we really, really know him at all?
That's a great point. Matt?
That was fine. Yeah, that's great. Loved it. Absolutely. And I think so. The idea that you were trying to flesh out or asking the question was, I'm going to see if I was understanding this right. You were saying, can you be saved but then not be a disciple?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't, I think that we come to the idea that you just can't. It's going to come out of you, right? If you love Jesus, it will come out of you. You will produce fruit.
You would think the only caveat that I think we have to put there is that it's difficult for me to look at Brian's life and say, what's coming out of him doesn't qualify. I don't have the right or even the ability to do so.
Right.
Perception is something that we don't always have perfectly. So I don't always have God's vantage point in it. And we can't do this check the box Christianity. We have to do something that recognizes that we are without him we can do nothing. Even the very things that we normally associate with knowing him.
Right. So I guess that would be like, we can't judge our brothers. I guess that's the thing, like judging. You're saying we may not understand where that person's coming from as far as how they're living their life with Christ. But there are hard and fast things where we can say, all right, the Bible clearly says don't do this or don't do that, right? But so, you're saying like everybody has to have that room to live their Christian walk, and as long as you're not stepping on people's toes, you got to have that room, right?
Yes, we have conviction about what's right and wrong. We can read the Bible, we can listen, and we can discern for ourselves some things that are true and not true from the Word of God. So we can look at the fruit of someone's actions and say that action does not appear to line up with the truth. But what we can't do is determine that person's ultimate destiny by what we've seen of their actions.
Right.
So we don't get to be God, but God gives us common sense to be able to determine what to do. All through Proverbs, for instance, it tells us what kind of person to hang around with and what kind of person not to hang around with. It tells us what actions we should take and what actions we shouldn't take. So we can see those surface things ourselves and frankly respond to them. But what we can't do is be assured of what we're seeing in another person's life, because frankly we're just not God.
It's not our job.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's good that it's not, right?
I'm glad it's not.
People would be in trouble.
I would be in trouble. Can you imagine that?
Oh, my goodness, yes. All right, so then we're getting ready this coming Sunday to go into the parables then, because Jesus in Luke, Jesus branches right off of this expensive Christianity, this costly discipleship, and he walks right into being forced into a question or a thought by the Pharisees, the religious leaders, and that is that why on earth would you sit around and hang out with sinners? Why would you eat with them? Why would you receive them? Key word there, receive them. Why would you accept them into your realm or sphere of people that you hang out with? And so then Jesus goes on to tell 3 parables of lost things. You have a lost sheep, you have a lost coin, and you have a son who technically isn't lost but walks away from the whole thing and then comes back. So in the midst of that then, looking at evangelism or the heart of God for people who don't know him. Thoughts on whether a Christian has to have a gift of evangelism, or is this heart supposed to be found in every single Christian? Is Jesus saying here that if you are my follower, if you're going to be my disciple, you really have to have the heart of my Father, and that is you go after those who are lost? Thoughts on that?
It's clear that there are gifted people in every human endeavor, every spiritual endeavor. There are people that are gifted. There are people that they just, everywhere they go, they seem to be able to share the gospel with passion and precision, and people respond. So that's the reality. But we should not miss that each and every one of us is called to live in such a way that God's glory is reflected, that they get a sense of who he is. Because in the end, it's not us that wins them to the Lord. It's him. The Bible tells us to let our light so shine among men that they might see our good works and glorify our Father which is in heaven. So if we live in accordance with the Word of God, we will be people that as we are going through our life would teach people the truth. We would disciple them. We would help shape them. So you know, I one of the things that I've been kind of captured with over the years is that how did Jesus make disciples? Because, you know, in Ephesians it tells us that we're to be imitators of Jesus. We're to be like him. Okay. And then in Matthew 28, we're to go to all the world and make disciples. So we get that. So we're to be like him. We're to go to all the world, make disciples, because he says so. Well, then how does he make disciples? Well, when you look in Matthew, in 4:23, it says Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every disease and infirmity among the people. Then in 9:35, he repeats exactly the same phrase, except where it says all Galilee, and went about all the cities and villages, preaching, teaching, preaching, and healing. And then it says right after 9:35 that Jesus looked out over the multitude, means he paid attention to what was going on around him, and he had compassion on those folks. And when he had compassion on them, he said, "Pray ye therefore to the Lord of harvest that he would send out laborers into his harvest." In 10:1 then, the people that he had told to pray that in 9:35 through 38, those very same people you see being thrust out into the harvest, empowered by God to do what he called us to do. In other words, if we will be people of prayer, if we will be people that follow after what God has told us to do, then we will see men, women, boys, and girls come to know Jesus Christ as a part of our progression through this world.
And if you, obviously, quoting the scripture that you did, you've probably done a lot of work in those texts. If I remember right, in chapter 9 of that text, when it says, pray the Lord of a harvest that he would send, that word send actually means in the Greek to thrust, to push.
Thrust out.
Yeah.
It's a very almost a violent word.
Yeah.
It's just thrust out.
Right.
Pushed out.
Right.
And you know, we're asking God to push us out, to do what we should do, to speak when we should speak. We need to be able to speak as oracles of God. We need to be people that really and truly, honestly desire to so submerge ourselves under the hand of God that it's no longer us, but it's him. You know, in Romans it tells us, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to give yourselves as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God, which is just your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you might prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And don't think too highly of yourself, but think soberly, as each man has been given a gift. So we are to allow ourselves to be so filled with the presence of God. You see, I believe that every person who is born again, if you are born again, you have the very Spirit of the living God. If you have the Spirit of the living God, then the question isn't that we need to have him come down, or we need to go find him in some corner somewhere. The reality is that we need to surrender ourselves for him to have full control of this place that he inhabits. He inhabits us.
Yeah. Matt, talk to us a little bit about the church, because I know that you have sometimes really good opinions and thoughts concerning how the church does at some of these things. So when it comes to the church thrusting people out into the harvest field, have we done that well? Have we over the years said, okay, here's this training, here's Evangelism Explosion, here's James Kennedy's, whatever that is, maybe that was Evangelism Explosion, yeah. James Kennedy. And then we have Contagious Christianity from Willow Creek, and we're teaching people how to evangelize and this canned stuff. What are we missing? What's the church been doing?
So I think what we talk a lot about on this show is we've done the inverse. Right, we're trying to figure out how to get the people into the church and make them comfortable here, not thrust them anywhere, right? And so I was thinking about, while you were talking, the point that there's no other way to do it. Because human nature doesn't want change. And so when we make this change in our lives, the only way to do it is to head into your different life, right? Because your natural tendency will want to be where your old life was. So, and I was thinking about, like you were saying, looking at Jesus, how did Jesus disciple and his apostles? Like, he called Peter out onto the raging sea. I mean, if there's thrust into a faith situation, there it is. And that's what we should be doing to the church, or we should be doing as parishioners. I'm guilty. I thinking about this now, I'm not this type of person. I try and be subtle in some regard. But no, I think we're doing the exact opposite in our churches. We're trying to bring people in and make them comfortable to be here, almost like we have this idea that we're going to do the salvation. We're going to save the people coming in the door. And so they need coffee and kids groups and men's activities and women's groups, and we need to have roller skate night for the family and all these kinds of things. Let's not.
They still have roller skate night for families?
I'm calling on what I know, Brian. It's 20 years ago. this is what we've done to
We were looking forward to roller skate night. It's like, man.
Yeah, no,
I wanna go there.
roller skate night was cool, man.
As long as they have training wheels, I couldn't roller skate.
You
if they
couldn't
paid
roller
me.
skate?
No, my
Oh man, even as a big fella, I was able to almost do that turnaround backwards thing. Those were great times.
Well,
All right.
once you get a mass moving, right?
Yeah,
on
no, it
wheels
wants
like
to
that,
stay in motion.
It stays in motion.
It wants to stay in motion. Yeah. So, but we're not thrusting anybody, and so I think we see the fruits of the past 30 years of the modern church, trying to bring people in and make them comfortable within. We're not trying to send people out.
But even in the language that you're using, there's a subtle thing that we need to be careful of. It's not us that brings them in or thrust. It must be him.
Right.
And one of the challenges is when we began the conversation talking about, who's in and who's out on this thing, and why is it that some people that claim Christianity, we're even questioning whether or not they're saved. It's because that we have ways of hiding. And the way that we hide is that we do all of the stuff. We do the roller skate night, or we do, even some people may go knock door to door, but they're still hiding. They're still not really allowing God to move in, through, and around them. And that is the art of Christianity.
Okay. And I get that isn't what we teach. We teach, or the church should teach. Yeah, I know. So I understand we can't do those things.
That wasn't a huge criticism.
Right.
So don't feel that.
Right.
That wasn't the point of it.
Right.
But sometimes we wonder why our efforts don't work. It's because they're our efforts.
Right.
And we're not called to survive on our efforts. Right. We're called to allow him to work in us. We become totally pliable. We're the Gumby.
Well, and I like the way that you put that. We're hiding in plain sight, right? And here we go again. I'm guilty of that. I'm like this. There's moments where I'm like, yeah, I got a hold of this, and God, you've never been stronger in my life. And then there are times where I'm like, I'm really screwing up. But, I'm kind of doing my daily thing that I do. I'm showing my face where I show it. And and I think we go in and out. As human beings, that's the struggle, the battle with the dark forces of this planet, right? Yeah.
Isn't it crazy that we can do all those things and people from the outside can't tell where we're at? One day we're really down, but because we're present with them, they think, oh, what a noble person. And then another time when we're doing everything right, but we haven't met someone's perception, they think, oh, that person's slipping. And really, they might be at the height of your Christian allegiance.
It's funny that you bring that up, because I was talking, I think, with my wife about our neighbors. We've sometimes been a great witness, and sometimes we're not such a great witness. And this goes back to what you were saying about letting the art of letting Christ work through and around, and figuring out how to get out of his way, because it kind of makes me sad sometimes when I think about I am not the best witness sometimes when I want to be. It's like that thing you're trying to put together, but it keeps falling apart, and I think that's what we do to ourselves. And the only way I live with it is to know that God is going to live through me and use me, and when it's the time, it'll be the time.
That's good stuff. Okay, so then, so what we've been talking about then, from Luke chapter 14 and into 15, Jesus has called us, all of us, I think, if we were to just sum this up, he has called every individual to come to him to find salvation. And salvation ultimately is found in what he calls repentance, which is a turning away from me being king of my life or queen of my life to letting him be king. And so ultimately it's surrender, right? I mean, we are called to surrender. And that surrender comes immediately from the point where we say, okay, we want you to be king. And then it comes progressively through our life as we say, okay, I see where I'm trying to be king here. I'll let you be king, or I'll fight for a little bit, and you'll keep working with me, and you'll be patient with me, and eventually you'll conquer, and I'll surrender this area of my life. And so it's just a continual place of surrender. And we have to be careful. I think what I heard you say, David, is we have to be careful to look at someone's life and go, well, they may not be saved, not knowing that they're in a battle where they're trying to surrender something, but they're not getting through that yet, and it's just not working. And I think we have to be real careful that we don't become Pharisees ourselves, thinking that we're there, because none of us are.
Yeah. That we give the illusion often of having it together, or the illusion of being in a place, and we fool ourselves. I think what I see in this world today is that we are often deceived about other people, deceived about ourselves, deceived about how to live out truth. And so it's a really scary thing. There are some people that you might call good-hearted, who do really wonderful things in order to demonstrate their godliness, but they still don't know it.
Right.
And that is one of the great tragedies of life. It's a heartbreaking thing to see someone working so hard, but it's for nothing.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think my preaching over the years has changed, and my thought, my philosophy of what Christ taught, and that is everything in my life is counted lost, but to know Him. I count everything, Paul says, lost. And I'm starting to get that idea that knowing Him is even better than sacrifice, right? I mean, no matter what I do to look like a good Christian, or even to try and please God. And I do. I want to please God in my life. I mean, sometimes I just want to cry because I know that my life is not as pleasing as it should be to God. But ultimately, knowing Him is even more important than just trying to do everything right, yes, so that He's happy with me, right? All right. Well, we've taken probably about a good half hour here in the beginning to talk about this. I don't know if you gentlemen want to throw anything else out there concerning this, but we'll kind of switch gears here in just a second if you guys don't want to throw anything out. But I think at the end of the day, what I want to throw out is that as a church, Northeast community, as well as a church, the evangelical church in the world, I really do think we need to do a better job at teaching and preaching that Jesus said, come to me and surrender your life and know me, like we've been talking about, and just know me. And when that happens, you see transformation like you've never seen before. Much more than you could see if you teach people how to do good things or how to be a certain way. You see a lot of people teaching, coping mechanisms or, 1, 2, 3 step plan on how to get rid of your temper, your anger, and all those things. And at the end of the day, none of that really works. Only Jesus in charge works. And that comes from me surrendering and going through that stuff with Him and Him bringing me to a place where I go, okay, I give up. I can't do this anymore. You've got to do it in me. Any thoughts on that before we break into next segment?
It just makes sense to recognize that it's Him doing it. That is the biggest hindrance, is to think that we can do something. I'm not talking about being passive.
Right.
But I am saying that if there's any good thing that happened, it's because He initiated it, empowered it, and sustains it.
Yeah. Amen to that. Matt, you good?
I think that wrapped it up pretty solid for me.
All right. We just want to say hi to some of those on Facebook. Carol, we're glad that you're watching. Renee, Naomi, glad that you're out there watching. Samantha, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time, but it's good to see you on watching. And tell your dad and everybody, your sisters and brother if you see them, and your nieces and all that good stuff. Tell them I said hi. Bill, Sandy, it's good to have you guys on too on Facebook. And then you're on YouTube, Matt, right?
I'm on YouTube. So far it looks like it's your wife.
Really?
Yeah, that's it. She
That's
said,
the best.
she said, what about me?
Yeah.
And then, did you introduce David? And then nice job when we did. Like, that was it. My dad's not here. Normally my dad would shout something out, but
Right.
he's building a greenhouse.
Oh, well,
yeah.
that's, yeah.
He's outside.
If you're going to build a greenhouse, that's going to take
Yeah.
precedence over being on this show. That's for sure. Survival or listening to some guys talk about some stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So April's the only one on there, huh?
There's 4 people watching, but
Oh.
she's the only one.
So
who
I shouldn't
gave a
comment
shout out.
anything like strange on there, like, hey, I think you're hot. And then you wouldn't do that.
People are going to go back and watch this, so I recommend not.
Well, I do think she's hot, though. But
No, that's fine. I don't think it's bad either. I don't have the right answer for
April,
this.
we are praying for you, dear. I know this is difficult, but we appreciate the things that you've done.
The sacrifices that you make.
22 years of going with this, calling me a husband or whatever I'm getting. All right, so our next segment we're just going to kind of jump into, and that is some of the things that have been going on in our world today, are unprecedented situations, and yet at the same time, they've been going on forever. So, for instance, disease has been going on forever. We've had it for a long time, and now we're pressed with a certain disease that is out there that the government and scientific authorities have been kind of divided on, trying to tell us how to handle this, how to take care of it, and yet as a church, we always try to do our best to follow the God-governing, man-made orders that have been put out, and so we've done our best to go through that, although everybody has their own opinion concerning COVID-19 and disease and all that stuff. But what we've tried to do here as a church, and I think as Christians what we should always try to do, and that is be sensitive to the hearts and the thoughts of other people, and yet at the same time, I get this sense that I'm living in a free society that says that I should be always tolerant of other people's opinions, but as soon as I have an opinion,
Specifically about Christ.
Christ, or even COVID-19 now, and we talked a little bit about this Wednesday at prayer, that all of a sudden now I get beat up for saying, hey, I don't think the mask is a big deal or whatever, and then people go, oh, well, you don't care about life. And there's a division. There's a division that has been happening in the world. There's a division that's happening in the church because of this. And I just was wondering too, Matt and David, if you guys wanted to just throw a little bit of thought out there as far as maybe how we tackle this a little better, maybe how we haven't tackled it right so far, or maybe some of the good things we have done as a church, or maybe, David, your church as a whole. Maybe you say, hey, we feel like we've done some things right and some things not so right as we're kind of wading through this whole thing. I just come to the place where I'm not tired of being sensitive to people's needs to feel comfortable, but I have one calling. It's to preach the gospel. And I really want to get back to that. Like I want that to be my focus.
You stopped?
No, I didn't stop. But I
So
felt
you want to get back to your company?
But we kind of did.
I don't want to be
I'm going to pick on you.
I know,
You went right off the edge, and I'm going to let you go.
I know. Okay. So let me rephrase that. I didn't even misspeak. I won't go that route, okay? But let me rephrase that. I have found myself preoccupied with trying to make people feel so comfortable with this disease that I think I have taken my focus off of what I was called to do, and that's just preaching. Now, that doesn't mean I stop preaching on Sundays, and that, but I think I've been preoccupied with that.
So I won't put it all on you, but we'll make you the object of this.
Go for it. I'm good. Yeah.
Since when have circumstances been able to dictate whether or not we live out our Christian life?
Right. Never. Right.
Does whatever circumstance, we can be locked in a box, does that free us from having to obey the Great Commission?
Right? No.
It doesn't.
Right.
So the reality is that we're just annoyed that we've had to change our normal, everyday way of doing things And because of that, we feel like somehow we've been overburdened. We don't understand, and I'm saying this very respectfully. We don't understand how spoiled we are.
I would agree.
Christianity was born in a place that did not love it, and under circumstances where they served under people that they could die on someone's whim. Different groups, they could be killed by the Jewish leaders or ostracized by them. They could be killed by the Roman leaders or imprisoned by them. All of those things were real, and in the midst of that, they were to stand up and still say the truth. So they were constantly looking at, how do I do this thing now, every day?
Right.
And we need to be living a Christian life that is lived moment by moment. If we have to do church online today and tomorrow we have to do church from a hole, it really doesn't matter, because it's not our ability, it's not what we have done, it's what we have obeyed. Have we obeyed him today? We cannot go on autopilot.
Right.
We have to hear him for today. We have to eat the manna today. And so the challenge is that it's exposed in me, my selfishness. It's exposed in me, I like to do it this way, so why are we having to do it that way? It's exposed in me that I think I'm entitled. We are wonderfully born in America. What a wonderful, wonderful thing. Why do we think we're entitled to this freedom when millions of people around the world are not free? There's still slavery of all kinds that exists, sex slavery and worker slavery. Those things really, really are happening today, and you can see it right out in the open. It's really, really a challenge. And so that's one part of the challenge. And another part is that we have become dependent upon our methodology. We have become extremely dependent upon our stuff. So it's 3 choruses and then we a sermon and
well, don't forget the handshakes and the coffee. You have handshakes and coffee.
Well, that's
and
only
then you do the
that's
sermon.
only for you not really cool people, you people that are just pagan. But that's it. I mean, it's that rhythm that we depend on. We actually depend on a rhythm. So in other words, we depend on our horses. We depend on our chariots. And what we need to be depending on is the Spirit of God. And I say that's not some super spiritual thing. That's just the reality of this thing. And this time of COVID-19 should have shaken us out of our lethargy. And yes, it's a pain to have to think how to do things differently. Yes, it's challenging to be able to not be able to do it the way that we've always done it. But who said we were always going to be able to do it the way we've always done it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'd like to say that it was somewhat facetious in how I was presenting that, but it really is. It is a cry in my own heart that I need to get some of my selfishness out. Right. I need to start just letting go, surrender, like we talked about earlier. Matt, go.
So I have a question. Then I get completely what you're saying, and I totally understand what you mean. And at the same time, I want to pose these questions. So, at what point we're human beings? It seems to me that this world is trying to shape Satan's idea of how he wants man to get along together, and that is not don't be social, stay away from each other, stop gathering in churches altogether. It's my understanding or my view that it seems like the state governments, depending on how they're situated and arranged, to varying degrees, have really oppressed the church in this time of COVID-19. And then there are other states who haven't so much, and there's no... You can look at the different rhyme or reasons moved around, and I think your comment or question was born out of the idea of like, it isn't so much that I want to go back to my status quo, but when can we go back to being human beings?
Well, if you've ever given up being a human being, that's the thing you should not have done. The problem is that we have defined what being a human being is in terms that are dependent on things that are not the gospel. I understand what you're saying, that it's frustrating when the state seems to tell the church how it is to behave. But if you look at history, the state has always been commenting on how the church should behave.
I want to say that as of recently, I would agree. Ever since they, bought the churches with the tax-free stamp, I think that the government has had a lot more input of what the churches do. I think prior to that, and I'm not going to say that this nation was founded as a godly nation. I don't know that. But what I do know is it was allowed to flourish. We, for a lot of years, turmoil and not turmoil, I think you just get that with people. This country is the only place in 5,000 years that was given, and this is God's plan, I'm quite sure that this, whatever, it's going to be fleshed out how he wants it. But this place was given so that people could express and people could worship and people could do what they wanted, when they wanted, and how they wanted without a ton of input from the government. And that's why, I personally believe that's why we have advances in science. I personally believe that's why we have advances. I think that this country has been a powerhouse for generating our modern life. Now that's good and bad.
I think we've had advances in science because the aliens came down and gave us the technology.
Let me.
Well, you said
Can I? I think Brian's trying to say, like, calm down,
No. I really believe that. But David's going to speak some kind of actual, good stuff into this probably. All right. We'll go with that.
I'm going to challenge your perception of us deeply. We need to see that one of the great challenges in all of this stuff that we see going on with the COVID and with the rioting and with the protesting and with the killing and with all of the stuff that's going on. We've given ourselves an illusion of good that I want to challenge. We have truly been blessed by God. There is no doubt about it. This is, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest nation on earth. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else, be anywhere else. I support its institutions. I support the governing authority. So I'm not anti-American. But what we have done, first as a church, the church has lied to itself. We've actually believed that we've been living holy and that what we've been doing is proper. And one of the places that, for instance, racism has been most propped up is within the church. And one of the places that racism has flourished most greatly is in the church. The church has had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to stand out and be what it should be, to care for the poor, yet we allowed the state, encouraged the state to take that over as if the state was capable of doing what we've been called to do. As if the state could do it in a way that is godly and right, when the state, by its very nature, is not able to do that. And so while knowing that America has been blessed, please don't miss the ways. See, we seem to be missing history, or we seem to have a jaundiced view of history. Let's go back to the first century. The church flourished in the book of Acts. It grew faster than it's ever grown since. But it was not in an atmosphere where the state blessed it. The state agreed with it. In fact, in around the year 300, when the state said, okay, let's be Christian, that's when the church began to show real signs of sickness.
You're talking about Caesar Augusta?
Constantine.
So that's just the reality. The church is made up of humans. Okay, so we need to understand that. And so the church has failed often. There have been times when, in spreading of the gospel, see, I love the. He heard my voice. So this is not an indictment, but what God is calling us to, and I believe what this time that we are in right now, the reason that we're in this is so that we might recognize just how frail and foolish we've been. We've been frail because we're so many people are so afraid of dying.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
What? Why would we be afraid? You know, one of the ways that Christianity was spread greatly throughout the world is that when the plagues came in the past, it was the Christians that would go out and take care of the hurting and soothe the people that were ill and bury people, giving them dignity. But we're afraid, and then we're in a time now where our rights are being trampled on, and we're mad. What happened to the people in like, remember Count Zinzendorf's church where that sent out missionaries all over the world? There were two missionaries there that really struck me. Those two missionaries sold themselves into slavery in order to be able to spread the gospel. We won't sell ourselves into anything. We, in fact, are demanding that we be free to say whatever we want, wherever we want, whenever we want, however we want. But that's not the gospel. The gospel is a surrender. We've been saying it's a surrender. Let's take the theology that we just talked about and apply that to real life here and now. How is it that I would give myself to you, a living sacrifice right now? How do I lay myself out on this table so that you might do whatever it takes to reach God? How am I the bridge for you to walk over to come from this earthly existence to the spiritual existence? That's what this is. And so we get our focus off, in my opinion, and I hope I don't know what I sound like. I'm just going to go on further. The reality is that we get our focus so much on what we've lost that we have forgotten what we have. I have the Spirit of the living God, and you can lock me in the darkest dungeon, and I will be just as effective there. I will be at least as effective as God would have me to be. because that's who we should be. So we're being suckered into putting our focus in the wrong place.
Okay, so I'm trying to think of, because I agree with what you're saying, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. And that brings up one question. So how does the African American community then, like if this is what we're going to believe, then we shouldn't have rioting in the streets. We should all be sacrificing and saying, I am a slave to my brother and my God, and so I know that I've been slighted, but I'm still going to serve my God and go forward. We wouldn't have rioting. We wouldn't have.
So that sounds good, and I appreciate that. There may be even some grains of truth there, but the reality is that I've done that all of my life. So you're telling me, wait a little longer. You're telling me, there's no justice, and I recognize that, or there's little justice, or there's uneven justice. But but you know what? You're a Christian, so you just suck it up and you show us how to live. Well, I would subscribe that many of us have been doing that all of our lives, and I do not subscribe that we should burn anything down or hurt anyone. I'm not there. I don't want to do that. But listen, you're telling me to give up a little bit more. Give up a little bit more for a little longer, for a little. Show me how it's done, so that you will be the godly.
I think that would be the misread. I'm not saying show me how it's done. I guess I'd like to say let's do it together.
Well, okay. I'm asking you to come over and let's do it together. Do you understand that you're asking to do it together? I'm certainly asking for you to do it together. Come do it with me.
Right. No, that's all right. So are we not then still, when we have this language of come do it with me, or what, are we not making a dividing line? I guess my question that I'm getting out of this whole thing is this going to end, or
No.
right? Okay, then that's the answer.
Yeah,
it's not going to end.
Why isn't it going to end? Come on, let's get theological here. Why isn't this going to end? It's not going to end until sin ends.
Right.
Sin is not going to end.
Right.
Are there going to this is a complex issue, and we want simplistic answers. We want somebody to come along and just give us a blanket thing, and then we'll all do it, and it'll all be better. But that is not realistic, and that is not truth, and it's never been the truth for a Christian. It's never been the truth that we had an answer that everybody accepted, and it's always been. Look at the Book of Acts. Look in the Book of Acts. What's the first big argument between Christians is over how different racial groups were being treated. That's the very first thing that we had to deal with right there in the Book of Acts, between people that had given everything for the gospel, and yet they couldn't even get along.
And so it's not going to go away. We're not going to find an answer. So but we're going to have to peacefully coexist, and we're going to have, I believe we're going to not have to erupt every time one of these incidents happen, and they happen all the time. I mean, one of the good examples that the stuff I listen to on the radio is 54 people were shot. 54 African Americans were shot in Chicago last weekend. Yeah. If Black Lives Matter, and why aren't we just as passionate about that?
There's a couple of assumptions there that are very frustrating, and that First of all, you think I'm not as passionate about those 54 lives. I am.
I mean, as a culture. I mean, as a culture, what I see.
Well, you're making me now responsible for the culture. You're making the world. You're making the. Why isn't the world obeying? You tell me why the world's not obeying.
We're sin and selfishness.
So we're in sin and selfishness. So you expect now the people, lost people, not to act like lost people.
No, I perfectly do. I guess what I'm saying is to go back to the very first thing that you opened up about, and I agree 100%, is can we all sacrifice? Can we not? I was telling Brian this morning, there's an old movie called War Game. I think it was 1982 with Matthew Broderick. I don't know if you're familiar with it. But it's a computer that's going to destroy the world. Right. And they're in a race against time to stop this computer. And nobody can figure it out, and it's going to nuke the whole world. And in a very simplistic 45-second end chunk of the movie, Matthew Broderick realizes the only way to win is to not play the game. And so he tells everybody, stop. Don't do nothing. Let the computer do its thing. Because he knew the computer was bluffing or it couldn't do anything. Good. It had no power. And so I guess that's my question. Can we stop playing the game? We're going to have the hurt and the division. I've been saying this to my friends on Facebook, and I've been saying this to people that I talk to. America, we haven't done everything right. I don't think a marriage, two people, they do everything right, okay? I think when you're old and sitting on a porch, you may cry together because it was a rough road. But we have to be able to forgive, and if we're not, it's like we can't forgive. And what we do is we allow the TV, and when I'm not asking you to bat for your culture, I'm really talking about how we seem to be controlled by the media and the people up on top that we watch on TV and listen to on Facebook and whatever. They get us sucked into the game. If everybody would stop playing the game and just be humans on a local small level, the whole country erupted because the whole country saw the game get played.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
It does, and I really feel for you because I know that you're saying what it feels to me. Let me put it this way. What it feels to me is that you're becoming aware of things that are unfair. You're becoming aware of things that are troubling, that are scary. You're becoming aware of divisiveness, the reality of the unfairness of the game, the inevitability of the game is now before you. My challenge is that the inevitability of that game has been before me for a very, very long time. I need you and others to wake up. I need you to see that there have been people that have been hurting for a very, very, very long time. And for instance, we say things that are not helpful. Well, a man was killed. That's a terrible thing. But you don't seem to be up in arms about the people that were killed in Chicago. That's not true. It's a false equivalence, and it doesn't work together. And there is so much that plays into those 54 deaths, and there's so much that played into this one death. People think that it's just George Floyd or some other guy that everybody is all uptight about. It's the straw being piled on and being piled on and being piled on and being piled on, and we as Christians, and I'm a part of the church. We as the church not stepping in and easing and responding to the pain of others. You see, when someone is in pain, our job is to weep with those that weep. There wasn't a weeping, there was a scolding.
At what point? At what point? At what point was there not a weeping but a scolding? Because
right away. Oh, see, right away. Right away, people were saying, well, listen, that officer, he must have had a reason for doing that, so you guys need to settle and wait. And hold on.
I disagree with you completely, because I don't know. There isn't a person in any circle that I travel in, and I travel in manufacturing, industrial circles. I travel in the church, out of the church. Like, I talk to a lot of people, online, offline. I don't know, and this is what's so frustrating to me. I don't know a person that didn't see a murder, and a murderer.
And I guess. I appreciate that, and with this particular case, that probably is truer than with many. The challenge is that people don't feel like they're being able to mourn properly, and you may not have gotten pushed back, but many people within days of this whole thing are pushing back, saying, well, it's the things going on in the black community that allow this kind of thing to happen. It's some deficiency within minority communities that's allowing this to happen. And really, you ought to give us a break and forgive us.
Well, I would have to say, this has to be the smallest. I would not believe. I would have to believe that this is the smallest example of what you're saying, and I would say, can we not ignore those comments? Is this then not the time to ignore those comments? I
ignore those comments every day.
And aren't we called to? We're called to carry that cross every day. Like, we all have to do it every day.
If you're calling me to carry it, you better be carrying one too. And I'm not feeling your cross.
Yeah.
Well,
Did the battery die?
No, I don't think so. The other night, April and I, April reluctantly, because I chose to push the YouTube thing that said live riots. So April, sitting there with me, kindly sat with me for at least 10 minutes while I watched some of these live riots. And I hear what everybody's saying here, and you know what? I guess I want to say this too. That I appreciate the rational and grace-filled conversation that we're having here.
Yeah, we're okay, aren't we?
Oh yeah, you're totally fine. That's why that's one of the things I like about Matt. He can have a conversation with somebody. He can have his opinion and thought, and that's what I love about you, David, and stuff. So that's what I love about this opportunity here, is to have this grace-filled conversation, because I think these conversations need to be had. But we were listening. Or watching these riots, and this is one of the things that I said to April. So I'm watching a peaceful protest in Los Angeles. This is during the day. This isn't, nobody's technically rioting or anything like that. It's a gentleman had a loudspeaker. He was preparing the people to protest in a proper fashion, that we love one another. At the end of the day, we are here to honor. He even spoke about Jesus Christ. I don't know if he was a believer. I don't know if he surrendered his life. I don't know anything, but he was, telling the people, we want to protest in the right way, and so they all got up and they began to walk through the streets of Los Angeles, California. So there was a young lady, and she was walking through a construction area where they had scaffolding, and a black tarp was hung there, like covering the building. Probably they were putting stuff down. And while she was walking by, they had a picture of her, and she was spray painting stuff on that tarp. Now, this is a peaceful protest, right? And I looked at April, and I go, see, that's wrong. And if we want to just make sure that we know, this was a white young lady, okay? So I'm not trying to say, because again, I think you're exact. I think we're all you cannot label a culture or a people. We are all lost in sin. So we're all so just to make that point. But she was graffitiing on this or spray painting on this, whatever she was spray painting, and I said that's wrong. And April said to me, and this is no fault to April either. She was just trying to think, maybe even kind of protecting this lady for her protest, which is fine. But she said, well, she didn't spray paint the building. I said, yeah, but that's not her property. That's someone else's tarp, and she's defacing it. And I said, so that's wrong. But then as I watched it go a little further, there were people, and this is where I'm coming back to, okay, because you talked about weeping with people that weep. The people who were in front that had just talked about this peaceful protest, they were dancing in this way that was kind of expressing themselves, which I don't have a problem with that. They were laughing. They were all this stuff about protesting. And I looked at April and I said, why aren't the people weeping right now with those who weep? Like, is this a time for celebrating something? Like, I don't understand what was going on there, because in my mind, I'm going, I would rather see people weeping over police violence. I would rather see people weep. But that's part of my personality, too. I'm more about the kind of the person that says, let's take this to heart and weep over things instead of, always feeling like we have this thing to celebrate.
I have a short answer to that.
Okay.
It could have been, and I did not see this, so I don't know.
Right, and I don't know either. They're I don't know anything.
But it could have been the reality of finally a sense of empowerment. If you feel like, whether it's real or not is not the question, but if you feel like you've been disempowered, and suddenly you're empowered, you feel like there's movement, you feel like there's control.
Right.
That is an incredibly amazing feeling that many people never get to.
And I get that emotional uplift. I see that, I get that, and so I thought through that as well. And I guess that brings us back to the point that when we see what we see in the world, we're not necessarily seeing the church. Even if it's Christian people, sometimes we're not seeing the true church acting the way Christ should act. And so I think, and even when you said, wait a little longer, I thought, you know what, I don't want you to wait any longer either. But at the same time, like I was thinking about Revelation, where the people were under the altar, and they said, how much longer do we have to wait? And Jesus said, wait just a little longer until some of your other brothers are killed, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going...
So more of us die.
See? And I get it.
That's funny. That's actually very funny, because that's, in some real senses, don't hear more of what I'm saying. But in some real senses, that's how Scripture has been used against black people for a very long time.
Really?
So somebody would literally say, well, you're going through a really tough time. Wait a little longer. Be a little. Why can't you just hold it in, because you're saved and you're changed? So why don't you just respond properly while this is going on? And so that's a true. So you take true Scripture and misapply it. I mean, you've got to understand that there in some of our major seminaries were founded with slave labor. Some of our major seminaries were founded with people that were white supremacists who seminaries now, places, good places, and yet those places taught abominable theology that was not, it was inaccurate. They're known for their accuracy on one end, but they taught these kinds of things. And so there's so much of that, and it's so piled on. And this is a very complex problem. See, we keep trying to make it a simplistic, one-off kind of answer, and it'll all be better. But we can't have a good. I heard someone say just recently, these kinds of gatherings are good, but a good kumbaya moment is not enough.
Right.
You know, it's long-term relationship that allows everyone to be healthy and whole.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think that a group of people is not acting in healthy and whole ways, then normally, if we see that, then we love on them. But the culture today says punish them, and it hurts.
So let me ask this question, because I've been thinking through this too, because I don't think I should have to say this, but I'll preface it that justice needs to be served to the police officers that do this kind of thing, okay? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, who is praying for those police officers? Yeah. You know? Who's saying those police officers need Christ as people who murdered another gentleman? And whether it's those police officers or whatever, you know, so, I mean, I'm looking at that and going, I want to weep with the people who are weeping over this kind of junk. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do as Christians. Now, do I sometimes not have the compassion, or I'm insensitive to that? Yes, I'm human, and sometimes I fall short in that. But I really want to weep. So let me ask you this question. I know we're running over a little bit time here, so I hope that that's okay with you and okay with our viewers. But if I were to, like you guys talked about coming to one another's sides, that was weird. You know, I mean,
well, no,
I'm just playing. All right. So if I were to come over, because I want to come over and be a part of that. I want to carry the cross and weep with those who weep and work that out. Would it be possible if I were to do that? Would it be the same if I said, I want to protest, or I want to speak against the injustice that's done to all people, say, for instance, from the police, for police brutality, whether it's white or black? Would that be okay for me to fight, or do I have to be specific? No. How would I do that?
Yeah, I get that. I understand what you're saying, and it's okay for you to have your cause, and that's one of the false narratives that goes on. For not thinking about the particular political leadership of a group like this, but think of the term Black Lives Matter. I find so many of my brothers and sisters in Christ are offended when someone says Black Lives Matter, as if it means that blue lives don't matter, or white lives don't matter, or red lives don't matter. That's not the case. That's a false dichotomy. It's not true, because the scripture that we talked about was the lost coin, the lost sheep. Did he not care for the 99 when he went looking for the one? Mm-hmm. Did he not care for the other possessions of his when he looked for the lost one? When someone says, I have this group of people that I want to express care for, that I believe have suffered and hurt, and I can show you that they've suffered and hurt, it's unfair to say, well, we know they've suffered and hurt, but everybody's suffered and hurt. We don't do that with other things. We don't do that with the abortion issue. When we say, well, these babies have died, well, all kinds of people have died. I don't want to talk just about abortion. We've got to talk about all lives. You know, just a substitute abortion for black lives. We would have no problem with saying abortion is not is these babies matter. Mm-hmm. But if we say Black Lives Matter, then suddenly there's this offense taken that we somehow don't care about people. Look, you know, my life speaks adamantly against it. My very life speaks against that. So I am hurt that someone who would say they know me would think that that would be offensive because I have a particular cause that has grabbed my heart.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be kicking under this thing. We need to be getting to the spiritual root of sin and be determined to be able to share the good news of Jesus Christ with men, women, boys, and girls, and that they be able to live out that life in a way that glorifies God. And I think that many are ignored or denied that. So I hear you, but I can't apologize for being frustrated. I can't apologize for feeling that you people have too soon had enough of us, and I really hate being lumped into a group, and so when I feel that just pushed off, that's maddening.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got a lot of people from all over, and sometimes it's very difficult because people are you find alliances that Christians maybe shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
I get that, but there are alliances all around us that people shouldn't have.
Right.
Just a few weeks ago, people were very upset with protests in general, especially any violence, and I get that. I appreciate that greatly. But I was aghast when armed men entered into a government building. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If I had been an armed man that entered a government building, it would be good that we said our goodbyes ahead of time, because I would not have come out alive. The way that people respond to different groups is, in my eyes, noticeably powerful. I can feel it.
So if I could jump in here, because I was talking to a friend of mine, or we have these same conversations back and forth, and he brought up the same point. And you're talking about the protests in Michigan when they went into the state house,
and even Ohio, but definitely Michigan.
Okay, so then I posed the question. So what you're saying is, even though, to me, I feel like
you felt you were right.
Listen. I'm just trying to talk. I'm just trying to talk about these things.
Yeah, please do.
So I personally, I was never a slave owner, and I don't know anybody that was a slave. And I know you heard all these things, but let me lay them down. I'll jump even farther forward. I wasn't even around during the civil rights era, so I have no idea other than videos and what people have taught me about what that was like. So I'm even further disconnected. And can I ask real quick, do you think that hatred and racism, do you think racism is taught? Because
learned, yes.
It's learned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I believe that my generation is one of the first that the civil rights era, I don't even know how that ended, to be honest. Do you view that as that it ended well and that advances were made? Or do you feel like it was just quiet and we were gonna see it again?
How old are you?
I'm 41.
In your lifetime, that would be, what year was that?
78.
78.
It's a good year.
In your lifetime, there have been all kinds of racial incidents that you would be amazed at their challenge, and you have not been exposed to them, so it's like they didn't happen. And that is the great challenge.
I don't see, and so I'm assuming that you're talking about like the riots in L.A. or you're talking about there's.
You're talking about the riots. I'm not talking about riots.
So there's been a lot of individual incidences since. But all right, so
wait a minute. See, I'm not talking about individual incidents.
All right.
I'm talking about things like redlining that were legal and still in the 70s. I'm talking about the challenges with work. I'm talking about the blowback on.
How about the crisscross busing, where we would take inner city blacks and take them to suburb white schools, and we'd take suburb white kids and put them in inner city black schools?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember that.
Okay,
but to me,
I don't remember any of that.
those are just those were.
You were just yeah.
Were those not? Were those not?
I don't remember it.
Were those not government programs to try and fix this?
Well, see, that's just. Yeah. How much do you trust government to do?
I trust them not.
Okay.
I trust them not at all.
So do you think then, if you trust them, if you don't trust them to handle the situations that you're most interested in, well, why should I trust them to handle trying to solve?
You shouldn't.
And that is the problem. We're being accused of trying to. We're being tasked. We now, as African Americans, are being tasked with fixing a system.
You're not. This is I don't think so.
That we didn't make, and we can't impact.
I think, to be honest with you, I think that we were making inroads and steps towards, together, all cultures, in mistrusting the government. And so much so, let me give you evidences.
Okay.
I work in factories, and I speak to a lot of African Americans in factories, and you know what was funny is a lot of them were like, I like Trump. We're seeing what's happening. We're seeing that politics and the government made us slaves. We've been slaves to the program, and they were ready to get out, and they would talk to me quietly. Okay, because there's almost like this. I can't say this in my own community. I'll get ostracized. I talk to a lot of people that were like that, and so let me jump back first. So to the Black Panthers had rifles and firearms on Capitol steps, and they weren't shot. I think if
you have a different view of history than I do. They're all gone.
The Black Panthers are gone?
Yeah, they're pretty much dead, shot, or in jail. But okay.
Well, I guess the thing of it is, though, is you say, I think it's under assumption that you couldn't take firearms to the Capitol building and you would have a different outcome. And I guess I'm standing here telling you, I'd go with you.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad.
I think a lot of people think this way. So to another point that you had about not being lumped in with the whole community, I don't like being lumped in with the whole white community then, because I don't play that.
Yeah. And good. And one of the things is, and one of the things that even hurts this conversation is that we've not taken it down to its theological roots. We are one blood.
Sure.
And we're not acknowledging that very well, even here at this moment. We've taken cultural differences because groups of people gather in particular places become parts of the culture. I happen to be a part of a culture that is made culture because I'm so highly identifiable by physical traits. And because you guys are melanin deficient, I'm sorry. He doesn't love you any less. It just, I'm sure he still loves you, even though you don't have enough of it. But
I do burn easily.
Yeah. Well, that's just to keep you aware of that. But anyway,
but I want to be able to joke like that. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we keep saying we're making more progress towards this goal.
Who's the we?
society. I mean,
I'm not so sure we're making all that much progress.
I don't know. Maybe I don't see it. I think this is where the white privilege comment comes in, or argument, and all of these things. But I don't know what else to do than to be an individual and say, I saw a murder of a man, and to me, I don't know how to be any less racist. I don't know how to be any less, because this is uncomfortable, and it isn't Christ-like, and we are all one people. But if we're not going to act like one people and try and heal together, and we keep every 4 years we keep doing this thing, okay. I don't know how. I guess it's almost impossible to move on.
See, one of the ways that we understand it is that you can't take. I have to give you opportunity when you are hurting or frustrated to be hurting and frustrated, and stand there and just wait until you're not hurting so much and you're not so frustrated. And I have to listen. You have to do the same thing. And
I think that's a good point.
We need to be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath, because the wrath of man does not work the righteousness of God. And I don't need to be told by anyone anymore, just get over it, because that's not a biblical response. That's not a godly response. And so I get that. Now, can you be less white? I don't want you to be less white. I want you to be all that you are. I want you to be what God made you. I believe that we serve a sovereign God who has made you the man that he's called you to be. All I ask is that you would truly live in line with the gospel that you preach. Live in line so that you are a man who loves, that you are a man of joy and peace and faithfulness, and you put up with some things. You persevere. That means even put up with me when I misbehave. You have self-control, and goodness is a part of your life. If you live that kind of life day to day, you will begin to notice things that are unfair, or you will, in your capacities, whatever that they are, will be able then to be what you've been called to be. Because there are systemic problems that you didn't manufacture personally but benefit from, just because those exist doesn't mean that I'm mad at you. I'm quite frankly not all that mad, but I'm not mad at you, but that doesn't mean that the problem doesn't exist. It doesn't mean, it's like when you're a little kid and the bully is one of the guys picking for the two sides for teams. And
I was always last. And I was the fat little chubby kid.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get it. Not only are you last, but you're put on the weaker team.
Sure.
So you're last and you're put on a weaker team, and so you constantly have this experience of losing. And you go through your whole life having an experience of losing.
It sounds like my school career, yes.
But it's not due to anything inherent to you necessarily. But you could never break out of that. And there are some days where you just, like you said, don't want to play that game anymore.
Right.
And when people say they don't want to play that game anymore, that the system is broke because bullies have generations ago sometimes have put in place systems that never allow me to win.
Can I just give a personal experience here? Because I just, for the first time in my life, I think, realized that as a young elementary student boy, growing up in a culture that was all white, that God, as a young boy and a non-Christian, who was just trying to find my way, trying to figure out whatever I was supposed to do and play the cards so that you could be popular or not, however you wanted to do that. I remember I had such a love for football, and every day at recess we would play football, and we'd get in trouble somehow. We'd get the football taken away somehow. The teacher would send us in or whatever. But I remember the popular kids, and then myself, and the kids who were athletic, and myself, who I was athletic, but I was a bigger, heavier kid too. But I was still fairly fast for my size, and I was athletic, and so I many times got to be the captain, but I was always the captain of the weaker team. And I remember a young boy who was a brainiac. He was a nerd. I mean, he loved computers, and this is just when you first were getting the IBM stuff going, and you would see green letters on the screen, that kind of stuff. But this young boy always wanted to play football with us, and nobody would ever pick him. And so I would always pick him, and oftentimes I would pick him first on my team. And I was determined every single day at recess to beat the other team, because I always felt like I was not just an underdog, but I was there for the underdog. And for the first time today in this conversation, I'm thinking to myself, that was human in the sense of the image of God human, but that wasn't a sinful man human. So God was doing something in my little tiny body there in that elementary school, playground yard. He was doing something in me that brought me to this point. And I think that's why like Matt used the word awkward or uncomfortable, and I hate that, because you're my brother. And I don't ever want you to be, have fear of anything, outside of that, or to have to feel like you're awkward or uncomfortable. And so I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking to myself, that young boy, his mom, I remember this as a kid. His mom called my mom one night and said, I just wanted to tell you thank you for your son, because my son has come home on a regular basis and said how much he appreciates your son picking him on his team. Now, granted, that was white, nerd, not nerd.
But that is exactly, you got it. You got it. You guys are the captains of the team, and if you don't allow us to play, or you always put us in a weaker position, and sometimes we are not chosen, and it's frustrating because we can never develop, we can never be what we want to be. So yeah, that's a beautiful illustration, and I think that, frankly, and I say this very carefully, but that's the responsibility that I would lay on white Christians today. You get to pick the team, so make sure that you populate that team with people that maybe on the surface don't have as many advantages to you.
Yeah, and he never became a football player in high school. He never became a great athlete. I did, however. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah,
Good job, Uncle Rico.
No, I played ball, and I wanted so badly to play for Penn State. I wanted to run the ball for Penn State, but it never happened. So it's probably because Penn State didn't see how good of a running back I was. We'll go with that. But he didn't. But I just I look at that and I go, hey, I think that God, even as a young child, had planted in me, or was planting in me, the idea that I am in this for all 100. Not just the 1, not just the 99, all 100. I'm in this. And as Christians, I think that's key. And whether you are poor, or whether you are Latino or black or white or whatever it is, we need to be the kind of people that say, hey, we are all on this team together. We are working for one another. And I don't think it's going to stop either, but I think what we talked about in the beginning, and then you pressed me on, and that's this. We are called to never stop displaying the gospel in how we live and preaching the gospel out of our mouths, right? I mean, that is key.
Well, and something that I think I'll take away from our last discourse, most recent right here, you know what? and I've already kind of tamed back my Facebookings. Like, I'm done. Like, if I correct me if I'm wrong, but you said, so you have patience with me and let me do whatever I need to do to whatever. Well, I need to have patience with you and let you do whatever. And I think the thing that I hate to see is that it turns into these destructive moments where we're throwing bricks and lighting things on fire and painting things and mowing cops down. But maybe I need to just take the stance of, like, that's what we're going to do.
Maybe you need to also get what I think is a grasp of history, realizing that other groups have been just as destructive as we seem to be today. Think about something like the Civil War, where people that if we were to do that very same thing, we would be deemed as criminals. They split a union, and then today many of the army bases around the South are named after Confederate soldiers. It's like, how does that happen? They lost. How does it happen? So there's a standard. That in 1920s, the KKK walked down the middle of the street in Niles in a big march. We're still seeing some of the very same things today that what you saw with George Floyd. That's for us. It's too normal. It's too much, too long, and it's violence on a mass scale. That's what hurts. Now, remember, I am speaking as a Christian, and I don't believe that we should be tearing things up. And be careful that you don't blame everything you see on the. There's instigators. Conspiracy theories should abound because
Right.
people are importing in people, driving them in buses, and you can believe that it's not African Americans is paying anybody to come in and protest. So there's more to it than meets the eye, and we as Christians ought to be able to know that. We ought to know that we have a true enemy who is Satan, and that no matter how much I fail, you need to pray for me, and I need to pray for you, and to stand with you even on the days that you don't quite do it right.
Yeah, I think we all could do that.
Oh, definitely.
That's what I think we're all called to do.
Yep. Well, it is 11:40,
Yep.
and so we appreciate.
We got a real extra overtime inning.
We did.
Inning number 12.
I hope you guys don't mind. Thank you for having me. This conversation, and I know that I've spoken possibly more sharply than I would have liked, but the reality is that we need to hear each other, and I felt the freedom to speak as I understand it.
Yep.
Well, we're glad that you did, and I personally, that's what I hope we never lose. I think going all the way back to the beginning, you said we take things for granted in this country, and that's one of the things we take for granted is the ability to talk to one another, even though it may be uncomfortable at times. We have to get these ideas on the table so that we can work through them. And I think if there is going to be a healing, and I you know what, I hope, maybe not in my lifetime, but my kids' lifetime, there can be some kind of healing and forgiveness. I hope the answer isn't that this never ends. At least for our country.
Yeah, there's more forgiveness than people are being given credit for. There's a difference between It's like this. If you back your car up and run over my leg and it breaks my leg, I can forgive you, maybe almost immediately. But my leg is still broken.
Right.
And healing still has to come.
Right. And that's going to take time.
And now I'm in need because I'm walking around with a broken leg or not getting around with a broken leg. And so there are groups, not just African Americans, but groups for whatever reason that feel that they have a broken leg. And although they may forgive, they're still damaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm thankful for the opportunity to have this discussion today. I hope that we can have it more frequently and more often. Not that we're going to change the world, but if we can grow in our faith, learn how to love each other, and that love to abound more and more, as Paul said, still more and more, as a body of believers, I think that's a good direction for us to be in. And so, gentlemen, thank you for being a part of this discussion. It was good. This is one of the reasons why I said we needed to address the scriptures first, because I knew if we got on this topic, it would run. So we literally took an hour, although...
We had a show on top of a show.
We had a show on top of the show, right. But we're glad that you were here with us today, and we appreciate it. We want you to have a great rest of the weekend, and just remember that Christ has called all of us to places of surrender. So today for you, that's going to look totally different than it does for me or for David or for Matt. But I want to encourage you that when Christ calls you to a place of surrender, as difficult as it may be, throw up your hands and say, God, do what you will with me, because that is the best place that you can be. Best place that you can be. All right? And we are out, but...
Did we lose our producer?
Our producer went to sleep or went on a trip.
Hold on, I'll get this.
And so I think Matt's going to try and fix this for us. But